But let me start from the beginning, from that golden afternoon when everything still felt like a dream come true. It was September 16th, a Tuesday that burned itself into my memory. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibility. You know that scent, right? When you walk into a new space and it feels like you're stepping into a different version of your life. The ceiling stretched up forever, at least 14 feet high, with these gorgeous crown moldings that caught the afternoon light. The windows were so tall I had to crane my neck to see the top. Through them I could see the courtyard below, with its fountain and perfectly manicured hedges. This was Westbrook Manor, the kind of building where movie stars used to live back in the 1960s, where every apartment had a story and every hallway whispered of old money and older secrets. I stood there with a glass of champagne in my hand, watching the bubbles rise and catch the golden hour sunlight. I was 43 years old, but right then I felt 25 again, like I was just starting out, like anything was possible. Marcus came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, his cologne mixed with the smell of the new apartment, something expensive and woody that he'd started wearing after his business took off. He was 47, and the gray at his temples made him look distinguished, like a man who knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. PT strong. "We did it, Bella," he whispered against my hair. 13 years of grinding, of saving, of working until midnight, and now look at us. We're standing in the best apartment in the city. I leaned back against him and closed my eyes. 13 years. That's how long we'd been married, how long we'd been building toward this moment. I owned the most exclusive bridal boutique in the city, Chen Couture. Celebrities flew in from both coasts to have me design their wedding gowns. Marcus ran a high-end renovation company that transformed historic buildings. We were the couple everyone pointed to and said, "See? Hard work pays off." When Vivian agreed to sell us this place, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I thought she'd made a mistake. People don't just sell apartments at Westbrook Manor. They pass them down through generations. Marcus chuckled, a sound that rumbled through his chest into my back. Vivian wanted out of the city. Too many memories after Christopher died. We just made it easy for her. He turned me around to face him, his hands warm on my shoulders. "This is our time now, Bella. No more cramped studios. No more listening to neighbors fight through thin walls. You have the premier bridal shop in the city. I'm renovating million-dollar properties. We earned this." He clinked his glass against mine. The sound rang out clear and pure in the empty apartment. I looked at my husband, really looked at him. Marcus Donovan had pulled me out of the darkest period of my life. 6 years ago, when my brother Christopher died, when the doctor said his heart just gave out from years of substance abuse, when I couldn't get out of bed for weeks, Marcus had been my rock. He'd handled everything, the funeral arrangements, the cremation, the sale of my parents' beach cottage to pay off Christopher's debts. He'd held me while I cried and told me that grief was love with nowhere to go. He'd saved me. "To our new beginning," I said, raising my glass, "and to leaving the past where it belongs." We drank. In that moment, standing in our empty palace with the whole city spread out below us, I actually believed we could outrun our history. Marcus walked across the gleaming hardwood floors, his footsteps echoing. "The movers are bringing your sewing equipment tomorrow," he said, all business now. "I need to check on the Riverside project in the morning, make sure my crew isn't cutting corners. You can start unpacking the kitchen boxes." "Don't be late," I called after him. "I want our first real dinner here to be special." He flashed that smile, the one that had made me say yes to a first date 13 years ago. "I always come home to you, Bella, you know that." I should have listened to the way he said it, like it was a promise he was already planning to break. The next morning, my phone started vibrating at 6:15. I fumbled for it on the nightstand, my eyes still heavy with sleep. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in years, Vivian Cross. My stomach dropped. Vivian was Christopher's widow, though calling her that felt wrong, since they'd been separated when he died. She'd avoided our family ever since the funeral, refused to attend the memorial, wouldn't return my calls. And now, the morning after we moved into her old apartment, she was calling me. Marcus's side of the bed was already cold. He always was an early riser, up before dawn to beat traffic to his job sites. I sat up, pulling the silk robe around me, and answered. "Hello? Isabella." Her voice was rough, like she'd been smoking or crying or both. "Don't interrupt me. Don't ask questions. Just listen." "Vivian, what? Are you alone?" I glanced at the empty bed. "Yes, Marcus left for work already. What's this about?" "The sale went through. The lawyers." "I don't care about the lawyers." She cut me off. "Riverside Park. The bench by the war memorial. 30 minutes. Come alone. If you tell Marcus, if you even hint to him that I called, I disappear, and you'll never know what you actually bought." "Vivian, you're scaring me. We bought the apartment. Everything's legal. What are you—" "You bought the walls, Isabella. I sold you what was inside them. 30 minutes. The line went dead. I sat there, staring at my phone. My heart was pounding in a way that made my chest hurt. This didn't make sense. The sale had been clean. We'd gone through 2 lawyers, a building inspection, everything by the book. What could Vivian possibly mean? I dressed quickly, pulling on jeans and a sweater without thinking. I didn't even make coffee. I just grabbed my purse and my keys and left. The park was empty, except for joggers and dog walkers. A memorial flame flickered in its brass bowl, casting dancing shadows across the stone plaza. The air smelled like damp leaves and that particular kind of cold that comes in early autumn. I spotted Vivian on a bench near the back, wrapped in an oversized gray coat that made her look small and fragile. She'd aged. That was my first thought. When I'd last seen her at Christopher's funeral, 6 years ago, she'd been elegant, composed. Every inch the sophisticated art dealer. Now she looked hollowed out, like something had eaten her from the inside. I approached slowly, my shoes crunching on the gravel path. "Vivian?" She looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark circles. "Sit." I sat, keeping distance between us. "What's going on? Why all the drama?" "Because I forgot to turn it off," she said, her voice flat. She reached into her oversized bag and pulled out a tablet in a cracked leather case. "The security system. I installed cameras everywhere in that apartment, Isabella. Everywhere. Your husband thought I was just Christopher's stupid wife who spent his money on art and didn't understand business. But I understood plenty. I understood that Marcus never trusted me, so I watched. You spied on us?" Indignation flared in my chest. "That's illegal." "You can't. Look." She shoved the tablet toward me. On the screen was a black and white video feed. The quality was grainy but clear enough. I recognized the space immediately. It was the storage room off our kitchen, the one Marcus had said was full of construction debris from the previous renovation. He'd told me he'd clear it out this week. In the corner of the screen, a timestamp ran. That morning's date, 7:30 a.m. I watched as the door opened and Marcus walked in. He was wearing the same blue shirt I'd seen him in at breakfast. In his hands he carried a tray, a bowl of something that looked like oatmeal, a piece of bread, a plastic cup of water. "What is this?" I asked. "Why is he bringing food to a storage room?" "Watch," Vivian said. On the screen, Marcus walked deeper into the narrow room. He approached what looked like a solid wall, then crouched down and placed the tray on the floor. He stepped back, and his posture changed. It wasn't the posture of a man doing a chore. It was the stance of a guard, cold, watchful. From the darkest corner of the room, something moved. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. A pile of what I thought was old fabric or rags began to shift and rise. It was a person. A man, thin to the point of skeletal, with long matted hair and a beard, dressed in clothes so filthy I couldn't tell what color they'd originally been. He moved slowly, painfully, like every motion hurt. He crawled toward the tray on his hands and knees. My throat closed up. I couldn't breathe. The man grabbed the bread with shaking hands and began eating, hunched over the tray like an animal. Marcus said something. There was no audio, but I could see his lips move. Then he kicked an empty water bottle toward the man with his boot and turned to leave, locking the door behind him. The man was left alone. He lifted his head, just for a moment, and looked directly at the camera. The world stopped. I knew those eyes. I'd known them my entire life. Deep set, with that distinctive shape my father had. The scar over the left eyebrow from when he crashed his bike at age 9. The exact angle of his cheekbones. "No," I whispered. The word came out strangled. "No, that's not possible." If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. "We buried him," I said, my voice rising. 6 years ago. There was a death certificate. Marcus identified the body. Christopher overdosed. "The police report," Bruce interrupted, her voice hard. "Especially when your husband is an expert at solving problems and your brother owes the wrong people too much money." I looked back at the screen. The man, I couldn't call him Christopher yet. I couldn't. Was finishing the oatmeal, glancing around like he expected someone to come take it away. Every movement screamed of fear, of someone who'd forgotten what it meant to be human. "The apartment was never mine," Vivian continued. She was speaking quickly now, like she needed to get the words out before she lost her nerve. "I was never the owner. I was the caretaker. Marcus bought this place 6 years ago through a shell company and installed me there for one purpose: to keep your brother alive but dead to the world. He paid me a salary, Isabella, a monthly salary to feed a ghost." She stood up abruptly. "Now you're the owner. Now it's your shift." She pressed the tablet into my numb hands and walked away quickly, her coat flapping behind her like broken wings. I sat there on that bench, staring at the screen. The video had looped back to the beginning. I watched Marcus enter the room again, watched him place the tray down, watched my dead brother, my brother who I'd mourned for 6 years, who I'd cried over every single Sunday, whose death had nearly destroyed me, crawl forward to eat scraps off the floor. The champagne from yesterday rose in my throat, sour and burning. I don't remember driving home. I must have, because suddenly I was standing in our building's lobby, my teas in my hand. Everything felt distant, like I was watching myself from far away. I needed to see that room. I needed to see him. But when I opened the apartment door, Marcus was there. He was standing in the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. He smiled when he saw me, open and warm. The smile of a husband who had nothing to hide. "You're back early," he said. "I thought you'd hit traffic. Want some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." I forced my face into something that might have looked like a smile. My cheeks felt stiff, like they might crack. "No thanks. I have a headache. I'm going to lie down." His smile shifted into concern. He stepped closer and pressed his palm against my forehead. His hand was warm, the hand of a man who'd locked my brother in a cage. "You do feel warm," he said. "Maybe you're coming down with something. Want me to get you some aspirin?" "No, I just need to rest." I walked past him toward the bedroom, feeling his eyes on my back. I closed the door and leaned against it, counting to 10. I needed him to leave. I needed to get to that storage room. 15 minutes later, his phone rang. I pressed my ear to the door. "Yes, Mr. Palmer. Yes, I understand it's urgent. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Footsteps in the hall. The jangle of keys. The heavy thud of the front door closing. The click of the lock. I flew out of the bedroom. I ran to the window and peeked through the curtains. Marcus's black Range Rover was pulling out of the parking garage. I watched until it disappeared around the corner. Then I ran to the storage room. The door was locked. It was just a standard interior door, white with a brushed steel handle, but when I twisted it, nothing happened. Locked. "Christopher," I whispered, pressing my ear to the wood. "Christopher, can you hear me? It's Isabella. It's Bella." Silence. Just the hum of the building's ventilation system somewhere in the walls. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the slimmest knife I could find, came back and tried to jimmy the lock. Nothing. The mechanism was simple, but solid. Then I remembered the video. Marcus hadn't used a key. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to picture it exactly. He'd walked up to the door and bent down. Not toward the handle. Lower. I dropped to my knees. To the right of the doorframe was a decorative grate covering the radiator. An old cast-iron radiator, painted white to match the walls. I slid my fingers through the ornate pattern. Dust. Cold metal. Nothing. "Think, Isabella. You saw this. You saw him do it." I pulled at the grate. It shifted slightly, but didn't come off. I pushed it sideways instead, and then I saw it. A small lever recessed into the wall behind the radiator pipe. It was painted the same white as everything else. If you didn't know it was there, you could live here for 50 years and never notice it. I pushed the lever. Something clicked inside the door. I stood up, wiped my sweating palms on my jeans, and turned the handle. The door opened. The smell hit me first. Unwashed skin, old clothes, stale tobacco smoke. But underneath that was something else. Christopher's cologne. Or what used to be his cologne. The scent memory was so strong, I actually gasped. "Christopher," I called into the darkness. I found a light switch. A single bulb flickered on, dim and yellow. The room was narrow and deep like a corridor. No windows. Shelves lined one wall, stacked with old paint cans and rolls of wallpaper. In the far corner was a mattress covered with a gray wool blanket. Next to it sat the tray from the video, the oatmeal half-eaten. But Christopher wasn't there. "Christopher!" I shouted, not caring anymore if anyone heard. Empty. The blanket was rumpled like someone had just gotten up. There were cigarette butts scattered on the floor, but no person. How could he be gone? It was a dead end. 4 walls. 1 door. Where could he have disappeared to? I tore through the space, looking behind shelves, throwing aside cardboard boxes. Nothing. No one. Then I saw something glinting on the floor near the mattress. I bent down and picked it up. It was an ID badge, the kind with a clip and a plastic cover. I recognized it immediately. It was from St. Anthony's Medical Center. I had one just like it in my purse from my annual checkup last month. I flipped it over. The name read, Chen Isabella. My name, my birthday, but the photo wasn't me. Staring back from that tiny square was Vivian's face. Her hair was cut short and choppy, her eyes wild and unfocused. And at the bottom, where it listed blood type, AB negative. My blood type is B positive. Vivian's is O positive. Christopher's was AB negative. My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the badge. This wasn't just a prison cell. This was preparation for something much worse. Marcus wasn't just keeping Christopher here. He was building a new identity, or using Christopher for something medical. In the silence, I heard it. A dull, rhythmic thumping. Not from the hallway, not from outside. The sound was coming from the wall. Thump, 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 thump. I froze. I knew that rhythm. When Christopher and I were kids and our parents would separate us for fighting, we'd knock on the walls like that. 2 short, 1 long. I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. He wasn't in the room. He was deeper. He was in the walls themselves. I yanked the mattress aside. Beneath it, one floorboard was slightly different from the others. Newer nails, shinier. I pried at it with my knife. The blade bent, but the board lifted. It wasn't a board. It was a hatch. Below was darkness, and the smell of mold and decay and fear. "Christopher," I whispered into the hole. No answer. just the sound of someone breathing hard, someone moving in a space too small for a human body. I didn't hesitate. I tucked my knees up and slid into the opening. The walls pressed in on me from all sides. Dust filled my nose and mouth. Cobwebs stuck to my face and hair. I could barely move, could barely breathe, but I kept crawling forward on my elbows, following the sound of that ragged breathing. These were the service tunnels, the maintenance crawl spaces between floors that I'd heard about but never seen. People said you could traverse the entire building block through them without ever stepping outside. I'd always thought that was an urban legend. "Stop," I choked out, my throat full of dust. "Christopher, stop! It's me." And in the dim light filtering in from the storage room, I could make out a silhouette. A man curled in a ball where the pipes intersected, shaking. I crawled closer, my elbows scraping against concrete, my knees burning. Now I could see his face. 6 years in the dark had transformed my beautiful brother into something else. His skin was gray and paper-thin, stretched tight over his bones. His hair was matted into thick ropes. His eyes, when they darted toward me, were feral, animal. He saw me and pressed himself harder against the wall, covering his head with his arms, like a child expecting to be hit. "Don't," he whimpered. His voice was barely human, rough and broken. "Please don't. I was quiet. I didn't make noise. Please don't hit me." "Christopher, it's me." I reached out slowly, like you would to a frightened dog. "It's Bella, your sister." He flinched away from my hand, kicking out, "No, you're one of them. You're with him. You said you didn't need me anymore. You said I was a problem." The kick caught me in the shoulder. The pain was nothing compared to what his words did to me. "What are you talking about?" I whispered. "I thought you were dead. We buried you. I mourned you for 6 years." Christopher went very still. He lowered his hands and looked at me. Really looked at me. In his eyes, I saw a terrible recognition mixed with disbelief. "Buried me?" His laugh was awful, high and cracked. "Yeah, you put on a good show. Marcus showed me the pictures. You in your black dress, crying so prettily. Very convincing. He told me it was your idea." His voice dropped to a whisper. He said, "Your sister's tired of cleaning up your messes, Christopher. She wants her life back. She needs that beach house money more than she needs a junkie brother." I felt like I'd been punched. Christopher, I would never." "Marcus told me you died in an overdose," I said, my voice breaking. "I paid all your debts. We sold Mom and Dad's beach cottage to pay off Greenfield Financial Solutions. Every penny went to clearing your name." At the mention of Greenfield Financial, Christopher made a sound between a laugh and a sob. "Greenfield Financial Solutions. God, Bella, you're so smart. You run a whole business. How did you never check? Not even once." He crawled closer to me. His breath smelled like decay, like something dying. "There is no Greenfield Financial. It was a shell company. The owner listed on the papers was some homeless guy Marcus paid off. But the real owner?" He pointed up with one filthy finger toward where our apartment sat above us. "Your husband. He lent me the money himself, through fake companies. He created the debts knowing I couldn't pay them back. He dug the trap specifically to catch everything. The beach house, Dad's life insurance, your inheritance, and me." The crawl space felt like it was closing in. I couldn't breathe. The puzzle was assembling itself in my mind, piece by horrible piece. Marcus hadn't saved me from Christopher's death. He'd orchestrated it. "But why keep you alive?" I forced the words out. "If he got everything, why not just—" "Because I'm not just a debtor," Christopher interrupted. His eyes were suddenly clear, terrifyingly lucid. "I'm a witness, and I'm the star of his insurance policy." He reached into his filthy clothes and pulled out a small flash drive on a dirty string around his neck. 6 years ago, He brought men to that basement. They beat me. Then one of them injected me with something that stopped my heart. I could hear everything, Bella. I could see everything. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. They put me in a body bag. Marcus filmed all of it. Filmed my dead face. Filmed the bot doctor pronouncing me. Then when I woke up, he showed me the video. Tears were streaming down Christopher's face, cutting tracks through the grime. He said, "See, Christopher? You're officially dead. If you ever show your face, if you ever try to contact your sister, I'll send this video to the police. Not as proof of my crime, as proof that you faked your own death to escape creditors and the IRS. Fraud, tax evasion, identity theft. You'll get 15 years in federal prison. And inside, I'll make sure you don't survive your first month." I understood then. Marcus had created the perfect trap. A dead man can't go to the police. A dead man has no rights. A dead man exists only as long as he's useful to his captor. He's been blackmailing you with your own death, I breathed. Not just me. Christopher looked at me with eyes full of guilt. You too. You identified the body, Bella. Your signature is on the police report. You confirmed the death. You're an accomplice now, whether you knew it or not. He told me that if I ever escaped, he'd make sure you went to prison too. For insurance fraud, for aiding in my fake death, for everything. Above us, the apartment door slammed shut. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor directly over our heads. Bella? Marcus's voice echoed through the floorboards. Honey, I picked up those almond croissants you love. Where are you? Christopher's hand shot out and clamped over my mouth. His eyes were wide with terror. Quiet, he mouthed. He hears everything. He always knows. I nodded. Christopher slowly removed his hand. We both held our breath, pressed against the cold pipes, listening. Marcus's footsteps moved through the apartment. Bella? You're not in the bedroom. That's strange. The footsteps got closer. He was walking toward the storage room. My heart was hammering so loud, I was sure he could hear it. The dust in my throat was making me want to cough, but I bit my lip until I tasted blood. The floorboards creaked directly above us. Marcus was standing right over the hatch. Bella? His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. Now he sounded puzzled, suspicious. The storage room door's open. That's odd. Christopher was shaking beside me, his whole body trembling. I could see in his eyes what 6 years of this had done to him, the constant fear, the waiting for the door to open. Never knowing if this would be the day, Marcus decided he wasn't useful anymore. The footsteps moved away, back toward the kitchen. We heard the creak of a cabinet opening. I looked at Christopher. His lips moved silently. Go, please. I nodded. I'd come back for him. I'd come back with help, with police, with something. But right now, I needed to get out before Marcus found me here. I crawled backward through the tunnel, moving as quietly as I could. My muscles were cramping, my hands were bleeding from scrapes, but I kept going. When I reached the storage room, I pulled myself up through the hatch and immediately closed it, sliding the board back into place. The mattress went back over it. The boxes got pushed back to their original spots. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to get the cobwebs out. My clothes were filthy, covered in white dust and dirt. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely turn the doorknob. I slipped into the hallway, just as Marcus came out of the kitchen. He was holding a bakery box. When he saw me, his face brightened. There you are! I was starting to think you'd run off. Then he saw my hands. His smile faltered. Bella? What happened to you? My hands were filthy, covered in dust and dried blood from the scrapes. My jeans had white plaster stains on the knees. I looked down. My hands were filthy, covered in dust and dried blood from the scrapes. Marcus set the bakery box down and took my wrists, lifting them. Sweetheart, look at you. You're shaking. His voice was soft, concerned. the voice of a caring husband. And your hands are a mess. This looks like more than just reaching behind furniture. I'm fine, just clumsy. Bella. He touched my face gently. Don't lie to me. I know you. You've been stressed about the move, and this building all the memories of Christopher. It's bringing everything back, isn't it? He was doing it. Right in front of me, he was rewriting reality, making me doubt myself. I'm not crazy, Marcus. Of course you're not crazy. His voice was soothing, hypnotic. You're exhausted. You're grieving. Even after 6 years, grief comes in waves. Maybe you need to talk to someone. Dr. Palmer helped you before, remember? After Christopher died, maybe we should call her. I don't need a therapist. I snapped, pulling my hands away. I need you to stop treating me like I'm fragile. At that moment, someone knocked on the back door. The service entrance. 3 sharp raps. Marcus's face hardened for just a second, his mask slipping. Then it was back, that expression of patient concern. Who could that be? I'm not expecting anyone. Bella, go to the bedroom. Let me handle this. But I was already moving. I knew that knock. Only one person knocked like that. Quick, angry, impatient. I threw open the service door before Marcus could stop me. Vivian stood there, and she looked even worse than she had at the park. Her face was gray, her eyes red-rimmed. In her hands, she clutched a thick manila envelope. Vivian. Marcus's voice behind me had gone cold. What are you doing here? We had an agreement. The sale is final. You got your money. You were supposed to leave the city. The money's gone, Marcus. Vivian pushed past me into the apartment. She didn't even look at me. Her eyes were locked on him. Your little payoff for a one-way ticket to Vancouver? It's a joke. I need more. A lot more. Are you drunk? Marcus moved toward her, clearly intending to throw her out. Get out before I call security. Call them, Vivian shrieked. Call security. Call the police. Call whoever you want. Let them all know you have a dead man living in your walls. Marcus stopped. His eyes flicked to me, calculating. Bella, go to the other room. She already knows, Vivian said. I showed her the video this morning. She saw Christopher. The silence that fell was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Marcus turned to me slowly. The mask was completely gone now. What I saw in his face wasn't anger or panic. It was cold calculation. He was already figuring out his next move. You saw it, he said quietly. It wasn't a question. I backed against the wall, suddenly aware of how alone I was. Yes, I saw Christopher. I know what you did. You're a monster. Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. He put his hands in his pockets, relaxed. Like we were discussing the weather. Monster. That's a dramatic word. I'm a businessman, Bella. I solve problems. Your brother was a problem. A massive, expensive, self-destructive problem. I solved it. For us. For our future. You kept him in a cage for 6 years. I kept him alive, Marcus barked, raising his voice for the first time. If he'd stayed on the street, the real loan sharks would have killed him. Or he would have died in some gutter with a needle in his arm. I gave him shelter, food, safety. It's not a luxurious life, but it's a life. You stole everything from him. The anger was building in me now, pushing out the fear. You framed him. You faked his death. Framed him? Marcus turned to Vivian. Show her. Let our Saint Bella see just how clean her own hands are. With shaking hands, Vivian opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. Bank statements. Official documents with seals and stamps. This is the account that was used to maintain the asset, Vivian said quietly, handing me the top sheet. The account is registered to a cleaning service that supposedly did maintenance on the property, but it's actually Marcus's offshore account. I took the paper. The letters swam before my eyes, but I forced myself to focus. Sender, Chen, Isabella. Payment purpose, charitable contribution. Second Chance Animal Rescue. Amount, $600. Frequency, monthly, auto debit. Start date, 6 years ago. 3 months after Christopher's funeral. What is this? My voice came out as a whisper. I didn't authorize this. Yes, you did, Marcus said. His voice was gentle now, almost kind. Remember that animal rescue charity I told you about? Second Chance? You signed up for automatic monthly donations. You wanted to honor Christopher's memory by saving animals. It was your idea. I stared at the paper. My signature was at the bottom. My bank account number. My authorization. You made me an accomplice, I breathed. You made me pay for my own brother's prison. To any investigator, Marcus said, stepping closer, this is what it looks like. A sister who wanted to get rid of her addict brother, who hired someone to fake his death, who then paid monthly for 6 years to keep him hidden. The motive is there. The inheritance, the beach house, the clean slate. The means are there. You're the one with the money. The connection to the building. And the evidence? He gestured to the papers. Your signature, your bank account, your payments. He was right in front of me now, speaking directly into my ear. We're in the same boat, Bella. If I go down, you go down with me. And the person who pays for a crime always gets more time than the person who carries it out. You're the mastermind in this story. I'm just the hired help. Vivian was standing by the door, still clutching her empty envelope. I need money, Marcus, she said dully. I have nothing. I've lost everything. Give me what I'm owed or I go to the police. Marcus looked at her with contempt. Fine, you'll get your money. But first, Bella and I need to discuss something, in private. He put his hand on my shoulder, heavy and possessive. We have a choice, Bella. We can go to the police right now, and we'll both go to prison. You'll lose your business, your reputation, everything. Or we can sit down like adults and figure out how to manage our situation. I looked down at the bank statement in my hand. My signature, my money, my prison. Something inside me clicked, a gear shifting. The fear that had been paralyzing me drained away, replaced by something cold and clear. Marcus thought he had me cornered. He thought I would break under the weight of manufactured guilt. He didn't know one thing about me. I'd been running Chen Couture for 15 years. I dealt with bridezillas, demanding celebrities, and entitled socialites who thought their wedding dress was the most important thing in the world. I knew how to smile while holding a knife behind my back. I folded the bank statement carefully and set it on the hall table. When I looked up at Marcus, I made sure my face was calm, accepting. You're right, I said. My voice was steady. You're absolutely right. We don't need the police. We don't need a scandal. I've worked too hard to build my reputation to let this destroy everything. Marcus blinked. He'd expected tears, arguments, hysteria, not agreement. You understand? The grip on my shoulder loosened slightly. I understand perfectly. We're tied together. I turned to Vivian. Wait in the living room. My husband and I need to talk. Vivian, looking confused, shuffled toward the living room. I walked to the kitchen and sat at the table. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit. We need to negotiate terms. Marcus sat slowly, still wary. What terms? We just keep living, Bella. I'll take care of Christopher like I have been. Vivian gets her money and disappears. Everything goes back to normal. And I shook my head. It can't go back to normal. I can't live in this apartment knowing my brother is behind the wall. But I also understand that letting him out now means prison for both of us. I paused, letting him think I was considering it carefully. I need insurance, Marcus. You're too smart, too careful. Today we're partners in crime, but tomorrow you might decide I'm a liability. I need a guarantee of my safety. Too careful. Today we're partners in crime, but tomorrow you might decide I'm a liability. I need a guarantee of my safety. Too careful. Today we're partners in crime, but tomorrow you might decide I'm a liability. I need a guarantee of my safety. Too careful. Today we're partners in crime, but tomorrow you might decide I'm a liability. I need a guarantee of my safety, completely, today. Marcus actually laughed. You're joking. That's over $3 million in assets. And what's your freedom worth? I lean forward. Think about it. I could play the victim. The poor wife, tricked by her manipulative husband into financing her brother's imprisonment. Who would the jury believe? The successful businesswoman who's been a pillar of the community, or the contractor with a history of shady deals? I was making that last part up, but I saw it land. I have just as much leverage as you do, maybe more. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. I could see him calculating, weighing the risks. Fine, he finally said. If that's what you need to feel secure, take it. But we do this quietly. No lawyers asking questions. I have a notary who works weekends and doesn't ask questions. We can do it today. Deal. I touched my phone in my pocket, feeling the slight warmth of it. I turned on the voice recorder app when I heard Vivian's voice at the door. Everything Marcus had said was on tape. But I needed more than a recording. I needed a paper trail that would give me real leverage. Before we go, I said, keeping my voice soft and curious, tell me why, not the business reasons, the real reason. Why did you hate Christopher so much? Strong? Marcus rubbed his face, suddenly looking tired. He'd relax now, thinking the crisis had passed, thinking I was back on his side. Because he was always the golden boy, Marcus said bitterly. Christopher the genius, Christopher the artist, your parents' pride and joy. And what was I? Isabella's husband, the blue-collar contractor who was never quite good enough for the Chen family. I wanted to prove I could build an empire better than your father ever did. I wanted Christopher to depend on me, to need me, to be nothing without me. So you created a hell just to play God, I said. I created order, Marcus snapped. Look, enough of this. Get your coat. We're going to the notary. An hour later, we were sitting in a small office in a strip mall across town. The sign on the door read Victor Castellano Notary Public. Inside smelled like coffee and old paper. Behind the desk sat a man in an expensive suit with gold-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself as Victor, property quitclaim deed, Victor said in bored, professional voice. He slid a stack of papers across the desk. The apartment at Westbrook Manor and the house in Ashford. Full transfer of ownership to Isabella Chen Donovan. Review and sign here, here, and here. I picked up the papers and started reading. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. Marcus was signing everything over to me, voluntarily, with no conditions. I looked at him. He was signing his copy without even reading it, confident and calm. Your turn, he said, pushing the pen toward me. This was it. With these papers, I could kick him out. I could hire lawyers. I could free Christopher. I could fix everything. I signed my name at the bottom of each page in large, clear script. Congratulations, Victor said, stamping each page with a loud thud. The transaction is complete. I held the folder of documents against my chest like a shield. Can we go home now? Of course, Marcus said, smiling. Home. Walked out into the parking lot. The autumn air had turned cold, and I could see my breath. I clutched the folder of documents, feeling victorious. I'd outmaneuvered him. I had the proof. I had the power. Marcus opened the car door for me. You know, he said as we pulled out of the parking lot, I'm actually relieved. No more secrets between us. We're true partners now. I didn't answer. I just stared out the window, holding my folder, already planning my next move. Get home. Get Christopher. Call the police. Show them everything. What I didn't see was Marcus typing a text on his phone while we waited at a red light. What I didn't see was Victor, back in his office, taking off his glasses and unbuttoning his collar. Pulling a bottle of whiskey from his desk drawer. The door to the back room of the office opened, and a younger man walked out. So, Uncle Vic, did she fall for it? Hook, line, and sinker, Victor laughed. He wasn't a real notary. He was Marcus's cousin, a failed actor, who'd always owed Marcus favors. She signed without even checking the second page in the stack. He held up the document I'd just signed. The header didn't say property deed, it said sworn confession. The text began, "I, Isabella Chen Donovan, being of sound mind, do hereby confess that for 6 years I have illegally imprisoned my brother, Christopher Chen, in a concealed room for the purpose of defrauding insurance companies and seizing family assets." Beneath that was another document, a general power of attorney, giving Marcus complete control over all my assets, my business, my bank accounts, everything, all signed in my handwriting. Meanwhile, I sat in the car, clutching my folder, thinking about how I'd finally beaten him, about how I'd free Christopher and start over. I didn't know the trap had just closed around me. When Marcus pulled up to Westbrook Manor, I was already moving. I didn't wait for him to park properly. I jumped out of the car with my folder and ran toward the building entrance. "I'm going to Christopher right now," I called over my shoulder. "You have 1 hour to pack your things and get out." Marcus didn't respond. He just stood by the car, smiling that strange, sad smile, and locked the doors with his key fob. I ran up the stone steps and threw open the heavy oak doors to the lobby. I ran straight into someone's chest. It wasn't Paul, the regular security guard. It was a stranger, a massive man in a black uniform with no building insignia. Next to him stood another guard, equally large and stone-faced. "Excuse me," I said, trying to step around them. "I live here, apartment 12. The first guard moved to block my path. "Unauthorized entry prohibited," he said in a flat, mechanical voice. "Unauthorized? I own apartment 12. Here are my documents." I fumbled with the folder, trying to open it. "Ma'am, please don't cause a scene." The second guard put a heavy hand on my shoulder, turning me back toward the exit. "We have orders from the property owner. No entry for unstable individuals." "What owner?" "I am the owner, Marcus." I twisted around, looking for my husband. He was coming up the steps slowly, taking his time. "Marcus, tell them this is ridiculous." Marcus stopped at the top step. His face was a picture of deep, sincere sorrow. He looked at me with such pity that my blood turned to ice. "Bella, sweetheart," he said softly, loud enough for the growing crowd of neighbors to hear. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be. The doctors will be here soon to help you." "What doctors? What are you talking about?" I tried to pull away from the guard, but his grip tightened. "We were just at the notary. You signed over the property." A crowd was forming now. Residents coming out to see the commotion. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson from the 3rd floor. The Johnsons with their twin girls. Mr. Reeves, who'd lived here since the 70s. Marcus turned to address them, his voice thick with emotion. "I apologize. Everyone. My wife, she's having a mental health crisis. The stress of the move, the memories of her brother who died 6 years ago. She's started having delusions. She thinks Christopher is alive. That he's here, in the building." A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. "Poor thing. She always was fragile after the funeral. Grief can do terrible things to a person." "That's a lie!" I screamed, panic rising in my throat. "He's lying! Christopher is alive! Marcus has been keeping him in the apartment. I saw him. I have the video." I yanked the folder open, pulling out the papers to show the nearest guard. "Look, the deed! He signed it over to me. It's right here." The guard glanced at the paper and actually smirked. "Can you read, lady?" I looked down at the page. The header said, "Sworn confession." The world tilted sideways. I flipped through the stack frantically. Every page I'd thought was a property deed was actually something else. The confession, a power of attorney, a mental health evaluation form declaring me unstable, all signed in my handwriting. "No," I whispered. "No, this was switched. Victor, the notary, switched them. This isn't what I signed." "Victor notarized what you willingly signed, Bella," Marcus said sadly, taking the folder from my shaking hands. You confessed to keeping a homeless man in our apartment, claiming he was Christopher. You've been experiencing delusions driven by grief and guilt. It's all documented. And then pause for a second. He turned to the guards. There's a man in the storage room. Please remove him. He's a vagrant my wife brought into our home. The police need to figure out who he actually is. The police need to figure out who he's in. Silent in the sound of his voice. He sounds like dragging a Christopher. And boom. I lunged toward him, but the guard caught me around the waist. It's him. Look at him. You people knew Christopher. You remember him. The crowd of neighbors recoiled. They didn't see the brilliant graduate student who used to help Mrs. Patterson with her groceries. They didn't see the young man who'd organized the building's book club. They saw a wild-eyed, delusional man in rags who was barely coherent. My God, Mrs. Patterson whispered. She really has lost her mind, bringing a homeless man into Westbrook Manor and calling him Christopher. It is Christopher. I was screaming now, fighting against the guard's hold. Look at his eyes. Look at the scar on his eyebrow. You people knew him. But they were backing away, looking at me with pity and fear. Marcus walked over to Christopher. He didn't look at him like a brother-in-law. He looked at him like something distasteful that needed to be disposed of. Take him to County General, Marcus said. Psychiatric intake. No ID, no family. John Doe. He has ID, I suddenly remembered. He has my hospital badge, the fake one. It proves Marcus created a false identity. But Marcus was already pulling something from his pocket. My phone. He held it up so I could see the screen, then casually deleted something. The audio recording I'd made, gone. Poor Bella, he said quietly, stepping close enough that only I could hear. Losing your phone, losing your mind, losing everything. The guard shoved me backward, and I fell to my knees on the stone steps, my pants ripped. My palms scraped against the rough surface. I looked up. Marcus stood above me like a king on his throne. Next to him, as if materializing from nowhere, was Vivian. But she didn't look scared anymore. She looked triumphant. We packed your things, Vivian announced loudly, for all the neighbors to hear. Can't have a mentally ill person's belongings cluttering up a respectable building. She pointed toward the street. There, parked at the curb, was an old van with its back doors open. Inside, I could see my belongings thrown in haphazardly. My grandmother's sewing machine, the rolls of Italian silk I'd been saving for years, my design portfolios, my entire career, my entire history, dumped like trash. Take your things and leave, Vivian said, or I'm having them taken to the dump. I sat there on the cold stone steps, bleeding and broken. Around me, the neighbors were already dispersing, shaking their heads, gossiping about poor unstable Bella who'd finally snapped. Christopher was being loaded into an unmarked van. Marcus was accepting condolences from the building manager about his troubled wife. No home, no business, no evidence, no proof. Nothing but scraped knees and the taste of failure in my mouth. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just sat there, feeling the cold seep into my bones. Then something shifted inside me, a tiny spark of anger that began to grow. Marcus thought he'd won. He thought I was defeated. He didn't know me at all. I stood up slowly, ignoring the pain in my knees. My eyes went to the second-floor windows of the East Wing. Behind those curtains lived someone Marcus had overlooked in his calculations. Someone who knew every secret of Westbrook Manor because she'd lived here for 40 years and had been the building's board president for 20 of them. Mrs. Helena Ashworth, the building's matriarch, a former Broadway actress whose word was law at Westbrook. Even Marcus, with all his money and manipulation, had always deferred to her. Kissed her hand, brought her flowers. Helena knew everyone. Helena remembered everything. And Helena had always told me I reminded her of herself when she was young. I grabbed my purse from where it had fallen, and keeping low behind the hedges, ran to the service entrance of the east wing. The door was unlocked. These old buildings were like that. People still trusted their neighbors. I flew up the service stairs to the second floor and pressed Helena's bell. 3 shorts, 1 long. A signal from my childhood that meant, it's urgent. The door opened almost immediately. Helena stood there in a silk robe, her signature cigarette holder in one hand. She was in her 70s, but still beautiful, still commanding. Isabella, dear God. She took in my torn clothes, my bleeding hands, my wild expression. What on earth is happening? I saw the commotion from my window. Mrs. Ashworth, please. I stumbled into her foyer and locked the door behind me. Marcus has lost his mind. He's trying to have me committed. He's framed me. I need help. Helena didn't waste time with questions. She could see I was genuinely terrified. Come, let's get you cleaned up. You need water and a moment to think clearly. Her apartment was like stepping into another era. Antique furniture, framed playbills on the walls, the smell of expensive perfume and old books. Hide me, I whispered, just for a few hours. Marcus will come looking. He'll check everywhere. Of course I'll hide you, Helena said immediately. Come to the service room. It's not even on the modern floor plans. It's from when buildings had live-in staff. I use it for storage now. I'll lock you in from the outside for security. If anyone comes asking, I'll say I lost the key years ago. She led me through her apartment to a narrow door I'd never noticed before. Behind it was a small windowless room filled with boxes, old theater costumes, and stacks of magazines. Thank you, Mrs. Ashworth, I said, my voice cracking with relief. You're the only person I can trust. Rest, dear. I'll bring you tea in a moment. The door closed. I heard the lock click. I was alone in the semi-darkness, surrounded by the detritus of Helena's long life. I slumped against the wall, finally letting myself feel the full weight of what had happened. Christopher was gone. My business was gone. My home was gone. Everything I'd built for 15 years, destroyed in one afternoon. I put my head in my hands and tried to think. There had to be a way out. There had to be evidence somewhere that could prove Marcus's guilt. Something he'd overlooked. My eyes adjusted to the dim light. In the corner of the room was an old secretary desk, covered in papers and old ledgers. I reached for one absently, just needing something to do with my hands. It was an old building ledger, worn and tattered. Helena had been the board president for decades. She'd kept meticulous unofficial records of every building expense, every repair, every resident issue. I opened it to a random page. Columns of numbers, dates, names of residents. Then one name jumped out at me, Donovan Marcus. I looked closer. These weren't Marcus's payments to the building. These were payments from Marcus to Helena. Kitchen renovation, Ashworth unit, $18,000, paid by Donovan. Custom climate control system, Ashworth unit, $15,000, paid by Donovan. Monthly building fees, Ashworth unit, paid by Donovan. My hands started shaking. For years, Marcus had been paying for Helena's comfort, her renovations, her expenses. Why would he do that unless he was buying something? I flipped back to 6 years ago, to the week of Christopher's funeral. October 19th, 6 years ago. Entry. Received from Donovan M. $25,000. Purpose. Community Discretionary Fund. And below, in Helena's elegant script, board meeting held. Death of C. Chen confirmed. No questions from residents. I remembered that day. The emergency board meeting where they discussed Christopher's outstanding debts to the building association. Marcus had presented the death certificate. They'd needed witnesses to confirm the body removal. And Helena, respected, trusted Helena, had stood up in her most commanding theater voice and said, I saw them take him out myself, late at night. Poor boy. Such a tragedy. Her word had been enough. The police hadn't bothered interviewing other residents. Why would they question the word of Mrs. Helena Ashworth? She'd sold Christopher, sold him for renovations and paid bills. And I just walked right into her apartment and asked her to lock me in. Footsteps outside the door. Not the slow shuffle of an old woman. Quick, purposeful steps. Then Helena's voice, but not the warm, concerned tone from before. This was businesslike, cold. "Yes, Marcus, she's here." Came running right to me. The naive little fool. "I have her locked in the back storage room. And, if you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you." And, a pause. Marcus was speaking on the other end. And timely talking. I told her I'd bring tea. Another pause. "Of course, I'll call Peaceful Pines Private Transport. They don't ask questions, and they use sedatives if needed. Have them come to the side entrance. I'll let them in." A strong pause. My heart stopped. "Marcus, we agreed. My sunroom needs restoration this year. The glass panels are original and very expensive." Her voice was mercenary, calculating. "Do we have a deal?" I heard her laugh, pleased with whatever Marcus had promised. "Excellent. I'll see you in 10 minutes. The footsteps faded. I stood frozen in that tiny room, the ledger still in my hands. The betrayal was total. There was no kindly old guard of tradition. There was a network of people Marcus had been feeding for years. And now they were ready to devour me. 10 minutes. I had 10 minutes before orderlies arrived to take me away to some private facility where no one would ever believe my story. I looked around frantically. The room had one tiny window near the ceiling, barely big enough for a child. But I wasn't a child anymore. I was a woman fighting for her life. I climbed onto the desk, stepped right on that damning ledger, and pushed at the window frame with all my strength. The old paint cracked. The window creaked open. Cold air rushed in, smelling of basement dampness and freedom. The window led to a ventilation shaft that sloped down toward the basement. I pulled myself through, the frame scraping my ribs, and let myself slide down the metal chute. I hit the bottom hard, landing on a pile of old drop cloths in the boiler room. Pain shot through my ankle, but I forced myself up. The basement. I knew these basements. Christopher and I had explored them as children, playing detective in the maze of pipes and storage rooms. I navigated through the darkness toward the service exit that led to the alley between buildings. 10 minutes later, I was out, limping through the side streets, heading toward the one place Marcus hadn't touched yet, my boutique. Chen Couture was tucked into a converted brownstone 3 blocks from Westbrook Manor. I'd always kept it separate from our personal life, a sanctuary that was mine alone. I let myself in through the back entrance. The familiar smell of fabric and thread and possibility wrapped around me like a hug. Here, among the wedding gowns and the mannequins and the bolts of silk, I could think. I collapsed into my office chair and forced my brain to work. What did I have? Nothing. What did Marcus have? Everything. Money, documents, witnesses. But Marcus had one weakness. He was obsessed with appearing legitimate. Every crime he committed was carefully framed to look legal on paper. And at Westbrook Manor, there was one document that would expose everything. One piece of evidence that even Marcus's money couldn't erase. The building's original architectural plans. Westbrook Manor had been built in 1962, and it was registered as a historic landmark. That meant any structural changes required approval from both the Building Association and the city's Historic Preservation Board. Any unauthorized modification to the floor plan, any alteration to load-bearing walls, was grounds for immediate forfeiture of property rights. Marcus had built that secret room. He'd cut through walls. He'd seized part of the building's common ventilation system. All without permission. All illegal. If I could get those original blueprints and prove what Marcus had done, I could destroy him, not through criminal courts where my manufactured confession would bury me, but through civil proceedings, where property owners would turn on him instantly. Nobody at Westbrook Manor would tolerate someone who'd endangered the building's structural integrity. I knew where the blueprints were kept, in the basement archives, accessible only to the building superintendent and the board president. The superintendent was Mr. Leon Torres, a 70-year-old man who'd worked at Westbrook for 40 years and who'd always been kind to me. Mr. Torres was the only person in that building who didn't take money from Marcus, not because he was particularly noble, but because he was simple in the best way. He wanted his small apartment, his newspapers, and his peace. He didn't want anything Marcus could offer. I grabbed my phone. Marcus had deleted my recording, but not my contacts, and called the building service line. Westbrook Manor Maintenance. Mr. Torres, it's Isabella Chen. Please, I need your help. I know what they're saying about me, but I swear I'm not crazy. I need to see the building archives, just for 10 minutes. There was a long silence. Then his gravelly voice. Miss Isabella, your father was a good man. Help me get this job when nobody else would hire an old man. I don't believe you've gone crazy. Can you meet me at the archive entrance, please? Give me 5 minutes. I hung up and grabbed a bag from my supply closet. I stuffed it with supplies, a good camera, a flashlight, a measuring tape. If I was going into those archives, I needed to document everything. The archive entrance was accessed through an exterior door at the back of the building, away from the main lobby. Mr. Torres was waiting, holding a massive keyring. Miss Isabella. He looked at my torn clothes and scraped hands with concern. What's happened? Marcus has been lying about everything. I need to prove it. I need the 1962 blueprints. He didn't ask more questions. He just opened the door. Come, but be quick, if anyone sees us. The archives smelled like old paper and time. Metal shelves stretched back into the darkness, holding decades of building records. Mr. Torres led me to a section marked Original Construction Documents. 1962, he said, pulling out a massive tube, the originals. Nobody's looked at these in years. I carefully unrolled the yellowed blueprint on the examination table. The blue lines were faded, but still clear. There was my apartment unit, every room mapped out precisely. And there, where Marcus had built Christopher's prison, was empty space, a ventilation shaft, a structural gap between building sections, a main support beam running through it. Look, I breathed, taking photos with my phone. This beam, it's load-bearing. You can't touch it without risking the entire vertical column. Mr. Torres leaned over, squinting at the plans. Madre de Dios, if someone cut through that? Marcus did cut through it. He built a room there. I can prove it. But, Miss Isabella, that's a criminal violation of historic building codes. If the city inspectors find out, if the other residents find out, Mr. Torres looked genuinely frightened. They'd lose their minds. Property values would collapse. The building could be condemned until repairs are made. Exactly, I said, still taking photos. Marcus can buy silence about a lot of things, but he can't buy forgiveness for making Westbrook Manor unsafe. Everyone in that building cares more about their property values than they care about him. I was rolling up the blueprint when my eyes caught another folder on the shelf. The label read, Association Debt Records, 2014 to 2020. I pulled it out. Inside were copies of promissory notes from residents who'd owed money to the building association. I flipped through until I found what I was looking for. A promissory note signed by Christopher Chen. Amount, $150,000. Secured by interest in family property. Dated October 14th, 6 years ago. My father's funeral had been October 14th. I remembered it clearly because it had rained, and we'd buried him in the family plot next to my mother. Christopher had been at that funeral. I'd held his arm through the entire service because he was so drunk he could barely stand. He'd been sobbing, devastated. There was no way he'd been at the Building Association office signing debt papers. But Marcus hadn't been at the funeral. He'd said he was handling logistics for the wake afterward. I looked closer at the signature. It was similar to Christopher's writing, but the flourish at the end curved down. Christopher always curved his flourishes up. Marcus curved his down. I'd seen it 1,000 times when he signed checks. Clipped to the promissory note was a power of attorney document. I, Christopher Chen, grant Marcus Donovan the right to sign all financial documents on my behalf. The date was October 11th, 2 days before the funeral. On October 11th, Christopher had been in the hospital. He'd been admitted with severe alcohol poisoning after finding out our father had died. I'd sat by his bed for 3 days straight while he was unconscious. Marcus had forged every signature. He'd created Christopher's debts before my brother even knew what was happening. "Mr. Torres," I said quietly, "I need copies of these documents, all of them." He nodded and went to the ancient photocopy machine in the corner. While he worked, I called a number I'd found in my father's old address book, kept in a drawer at the boutique, a number I'd hoped I'd never need to use. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Whoever this is, it's 6 in the morning." The voice was rough, annoyed. "Mr. Castellano, this is Isabella Chen, Alex Chen's daughter." A pause, then the voice changed, became sharp and interested. "Alex's daughter? I haven't heard that name in years. What do you want?" "My father worked for you 20 years ago, doing structural engineering on your properties. He said you were a fair man. Hard, but fair. Your father was a good man. One of the few honest people I ever met. He's dead now, isn't he?" "Yes, sir. But before I tell you why I'm calling, you should know something. The man who stole $200,000 from your company 12 years ago, the debt you've been trying to collect on, I know who really took it, and I know where he'll be tomorrow night." The silence on the other end was absolute. Then, "I'm listening." "There's a board meeting at Westbrook Manor tomorrow at 7 p.m. The man you want will be there. His name is Marcus Donovan, and he framed my brother for the theft by using forged documents." "Marcus Donovan," Castellano repeated slowly. "That's a name I'm going to remember. Give me the address. I'll be there." I gave him the details and hung up. Mr. Torres handed me a thick folder of photocopies. "Miss Isabella," he said quietly, "be careful. These are powerful people you're going against." "I know, but they made one mistake, Mr. Torres. They thought I'd run. They thought I'd break. They don't understand that I've spent 15 years dealing with difficult people. This is just another negotiation." I took the documents and left through the same back entrance. It was barely dawn. I had until 7 p.m. tonight to prepare. 24 hours since that phone call from Vivian. 24 hours since my world had collapsed. Now I was going to collapse Marcus's world, piece by piece. I spent the day at the boutique, preparing. I cleaned myself up, covered the scrapes with makeup, and dressed in my best suit, the navy blue wool one I'd worn when I won the contract to design the mayor's daughter's wedding gown. Power dressing. Armor. At 6:45 p.m., I drove to Westbrook Manor. The courtyard was being set up for the board meeting. Folding chairs, a podium with a microphone, residents already gathering to hear Marcus's big presentation about building improvements. I parked around the corner and walked toward the service entrance, keeping to the shadows. At 6:50 p.m., a black Mercedes with tinted windows pulled up. A stocky man in his 60s got out, leaning on a cane. He had the kind of face that said he'd seen everything and was surprised by nothing. I approached him. "Mr. Castellano?" He looked me up and down. "Alex's daughter. You have his eyes." He gestured toward the building. "This is where I'll find the man who's been hiding from me for 12 years? He'll be at the podium at 7. And Mr. Castellano, when you confront him, and neighbors need to hear it, loud and clear." He smiled grimly. "Don't worry, I didn't get where I am by whispering. At exactly 7 p.m., the meeting began. Residents filled the courtyard, sipping wine, chatting. Marcus stood at the podium, smiling and confident. "Good evening, friends and neighbors." His voice boomed through the microphone. "Tonight, I want to talk about our community's future. I'm proposing a new improvement fund, and I'll personally donate $50,000 to start it. We'll renovate the gardens, update the gym, create a children's play area." I stepped out from behind the hedge line, walking slowly across the courtyard. Behind me, Mr. Castellano followed, his cane tapping on the pavement. Marcus saw me. His face went white. The microphone squealed with feedback. "And new security measures," I called out, my voice cutting through the evening air like a blade. The crowd gasped, parting. Marcus gripped the podium. "Bella, security, remove this woman. She's been institutionalized. She's not well." "I'm perfectly well," I said calmly, walking onto the small stage. "And I'm a property owner here. I have every right to speak at this meeting." I pulled the folder from my bag and held up the 1962 blueprints. "Neighbors, Marcus talks about improvements and security, but he's been hiding something from you, something that affects every single person in this building." I laid the blueprints on the podium. "These are the original structural plans. Notice this wall." I pointed. "It's a main load-bearing support. It cannot be modified without city approval and board consent." I threw down photos next, images I'd taken through the service tunnels of the secret room's construction. This is what Marcus did. He cut through that support beam to build an illegal space. He's compromised the structural integrity of the entire East Wing. The murmur through the crowd turned angry. These people cared about one thing above all: their property values. "That's insane," Marcus said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Those photos could be from anywhere. They're fabricated." "Then let's get the city building inspector here right now," I said. "Let's have them examine the space, but you should know, modifying a historic landmark without approval is a federal offense, and anyone found to have done it loses all property rights immediately." "She's lying," Marcus grabbed for the microphone, but I held firm. "Am I lying about the debt too?" I pulled out the promissory notes, the ones with the forged signatures. "Or about how you created fake debts in my brother's name while he was unconscious in the hospital? Or about how you used shell companies to make it look like Christopher owed money, when really you were just stealing our family assets?" That's when Mr. Castellano stepped onto the stage. "You want to talk about shell companies and stolen money?" he said in a voice that carried across the entire courtyard. "Let's talk about Greenfield Financial Solutions. That ring a bell, Donovan?" Marcus stumbled backward. He stared at Castellano with genuine fear. I don't know what you're—" 12 years ago, someone took out a $200,000 loan from my company. They used Christopher Chen's name, his signature. Then they declared him dead and walked away clean. I've been looking for the person who did that for 12 years. Turns out he's been hiding in plain sight, playing respectable contractor. Castellano pulled out his own documents, forensic handwriting analysis I hadn't even known he'd commissioned. "These signatures don't match. They're forgeries. Professional analysis confirms it. You stole the money, Donovan. You framed a dead man." The crowd erupted, not with sympathy for me, but with rage at Marcus. He'd lied to them. He'd endangered their building. He'd brought criminal activity into Westbrook Manor. "This is a setup," Marcus tried, but his voice was lost in the noise. I turned to Helena Ashworth, sitting in the front row, trying to look invisible. "Mrs. Ashworth, would you like to tell everyone how much Marcus paid you to confirm Christopher's death 6 years ago? Or should I show them the ledgers?" Helena went gray. She stood up, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked old and frightened. But I wasn't finished. "And while we're confessing, let's talk about the security system in apartment 12. The cameras Marcus didn't know were still running. The footage that shows him bringing food to a man who's supposed to be dead." I pulled out Vivian's tablet. I'd taken it from Helena's apartment when I escaped, and held it up. You all knew Christopher Chen. You watched him grow up in this building. Take a good look at this video, and tell me if the man in this room is just some random homeless person. I played the video on the tablet, the screen visible to the first few rows. And as people leaned in, as they saw the thin, broken figure in that secret room, I saw recognition dawn on their faces. My God, Mrs. Patterson whispered, those are Alex's eyes. And that was it. The moment Marcus lost control of the narrative. The moment the truth became undeniable. Marcus tried to run. He actually bolted from the stage, heading for the parking lot. But Mr. Castellano's security team, 2 large men who'd been waiting at the gate, caught him before he'd made it 10 feet. Call the police, someone shouted. Call the building inspector. Call our lawyers. Wow, everyone was shouting now, angry and scared and feeling betrayed. I stood at the podium, exhausted but still standing. If anyone wants to see the secret room yourselves, I'll take you there right now. If anyone wants copies of the architectural violations, I have them. If anyone wants to know the full story of what Marcus Donovan did to my family, I'll tell you every word. And they did want to know. Well, they did want to know. All of it. 2 months later, I sat in the same courtyard. It was November now, cold and clear. The leaves had all fallen, and you could see the bones of the trees against the blue sky. Yes, Christopher sat next to me on the bench. He'd gained weight, cut his hair, and started wearing the glasses he'd needed for years. He still had nightmares. He still flinched at sudden noises. But he was here. He was alive. He was free. I got the letter today, he said quietly. The university is reinstating me. They want me to finish my research position. Apparently, my dissertation was saved by Professor Morrison all these years. That's wonderful, I said, taking his hand. Marcus was awaiting trial. Multiple charges: kidnapping, fraud, forgery, endangering a historic structure. His assets had been frozen. The state had seized the apartment, and it was being sold to pay restitution. Helena Ashworth had been charged as an accessory and was cooperating with prosecutors to get a reduced sentence. Vivian had turned state's evidence and was in witness protection. The boutique was thriving. Several celebrities had specifically sought me out after the story broke, wanting to support me. Apparently, surviving your husband's elaborate criminal conspiracy was good for business in certain circles. Bella, Christopher said, I need to ask you something. Anything. Why didn't you break earlier? When Marcus had all that evidence against you, when he had the confession you signed, when everyone believed you were crazy, why didn't you just run? I thought about it. About that moment on the steps when I'd fallen and everything seemed lost. Because I realized something, I said. Marcus spent years building his trap, but he made one mistake. He assumed that because I smiled and sewed dresses and made people happy, I was soft. He thought he could break me with manufactured guilt and social pressure. I looked at my brother. But running a business, dealing with demanding clients, managing employees, standing firm when bridezillas have meltdowns, that takes strength. A different kind of strength than Marcus understood. I'd been training for that fight my whole career. I just had to realize it. Christopher smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from him since his resurrection. You know what Dad used to say? He asked. What? Isabella's got steel in her spine. She just wraps it in silk. I never really understood it until now. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. We sat there in the courtyard of Westbrook Manor, no longer my home, but still a place I visited. The other residents had formally apologized. Some had even asked if I'd consider running for board president, now that the position was vacant. I declined. I didn't want to lead Westbrook Manor. I just wanted to move forward. My phone buzzed. A text from a new client. Mrs. Chen, when are you available for my dress fitting? I heard you work miracles. I smiled and put the phone away. I don't work miracles, I said to Christopher. I just know how to unpick old seams so you can sew something new. And that's my story. A story about betrayal by the person who was supposed to protect you. About discovering that the people you trust have been bought and paid for. About fighting back when everyone says you're crazy and everything tells you to give up. What do you think? Did I do the right thing by exposing everything publicly, even though it destroyed the reputation of Westbrook Manor and hurt innocent people's property values? Or should I have found a quieter way to free Christopher? And what about Helena Ashworth? Does she deserve the prison sentence she's facing? Or was she just an old woman who made bad choices out of fear and greed? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know what you would have done in my place. And if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that even when you're broken and bleeding on the steps, with everyone calling you crazy, you can still fight back, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, share it with someone who needs to hear that strength comes in many forms. I'm Isabella Chen, and this is my truth. Take care of yourselves, and remember, sometimes the person sleeping next to you is the one you need to escape from.